Hey folks, Matt Sharp here, back in the man closet doing another fly tying tutorial for you guys. This week we're going to be looking at my choking black and blue pattern. This was my go-to pattern when I was guiding on the Bulkley River, and it's one that I've taken down to pretty much any steelhead stream you want to fish and tweak it, change the color, but look at the general principles of the design when you're sitting at your own bench. I hope you guys can take some away from it. So we're going to start off with any salmon hook. Again, we're not going to get into details on codes. I'm going to end up cutting this hook, so we're going to start there. Black thread is a go-to. Here it is for me. And we're going to use 140, give us a little bit of durability here. I'm going to build up a good base, working it all the way down to about where the hook starts bending, because I am going to be cutting that. You can tailor make the size with a hook, standard salmon hook like this, to anything you want. Okay, so once we get that base on, we will trim the excess here. And we are going to do our trailer. Now this is sort of an old school style pattern. So much has changed in fly or steelhead flies in the last decade that it's quite funny. It dates me, but back in the day, this using a braid, usually a 50 or a 60, was sort of the standard. And unfortunately nowadays the technology of braid has come so far that you don't get stiff stuff like this anymore. They don't make stiff braid because obviously that's not ideal for on a spin casting reel or a bait casting reel where you want it to be limp. So if you can ever find any braid that's old, pick it up. I'm lucky I managed to pick up a 3,000 yard spool about 15 years ago of heavy stuff, and you can see this, it's got a lot of memory to it. If you don't have something like this, it is good to have this pattern on something stiff. So wire works well. There's a whole bunch of more modern options that you can use, but always double over whatever that option is. See, I've tied it in, I'm going to double it over here. That's going to add some durability to it. That's going to add some strength. Obviously, this is what's going to hold the fish, so we want it to stand up. Okay, so I've got that one side in. Now I know basically the curl that I'm going to take on this. I do not want it out the back of the fly, so I'm going to make it as tight as I possibly can. And a little trick is you take your whip finish and give it a little crease if you are using the stiff braid. And that should be good. I know that's going to sit probably a number 2 Gamakatsu, a number 2 owner, a number 4 owner, that sort of size of hook. And I'm just going to tie it in here on the back. Again, we're going to give it some strength here. We're going to go back and forth a few times, and then we're going to do our double over. So once we've got that built, we are going to add a tail. And when I was guiding, I needed a pattern to be really simple. I wasn't going to get into multi-stage sort of intruders, just because there was no way that I could fish, 3-4 patterns a day for 50, 60, 80 days in a row. And I usually try to go into a season with 100 of these patterns in different sizes with different weights to them. So we had to keep it relatively simple. So I'm just going to tie some ostrich in. Rhea works beautiful for this. When we pull our ostrich, I'm going to pull about a dozen strands of it. I will pull out any weird length ones. That should be about right. And then when I build my tail, I'm going to look, and I know a Gamakatsu is going to be about that big when I hook it up, so I want this tail to be longer than that. That's going to help where the fish strikes the pattern. Will be usually from behind or from the side there, or sometimes here, but it's going to help us on this take where the fish comes right in behind, and that's the one where we get it down the gut and you're going to tongue hook or deep hook a fish. So we want it to be inside the tail of the hook. I'm going to try to keep this uniform. If I do get a sort of bulky body to this pattern or a lopsided piece on this pattern, she will end up messing up the body. So there we go, we have our tail. And now I'm going to use a little bit of flash in the tail. Some style of patterns like lots of flash, some like only a little bit. This one's on the ladder, it likes a little bit. We don't want to go too flashy with this pattern. So I'm just going to double over one strand here for the tail. Oh, missed that. One strand of Flashabou, pull it up, it's going to come right down the back, and if I can get it down both sides, I will. I want to have something that sort of resembles a lateral line on this pattern. We look at almost anything that swims that a steelhead could eat. It's going to have sort of a lateral line down the middle of it. And I think this little glint of flash, or this little highlight of flash in the tail, accents that. For the sake of not getting tangled up, I will trim that. And there we have it, 2 strands and our Marabou tail. Like I said, Rhea works great for this. It's just a little bit more expensive, and when I was guiding, there was no way I was crunching through 100 Rhea style patterns. Now, the wonder of it is we're going to be using the same material for the body, and it's one that actually may not be the best material for doing this, but it was one that I used, and so if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. And the reason we used it was sometimes when we were up north at a camp, be it up up Nimpo Lake area or up on the Skeena, that sort of area, we couldn't get materials. So you try to keep your patterns as relatively simple as possible, and I would load up on some base patterns, some bread and butter, so to say, materials. And then you could sort of use it for every part of the fly. So we're going to use that Flashabou again, and that's the electric blue. That's one of my favorite colors for steelhead anywhere. You'll see it in a lot of patterns from numerous different guides. So we're going to tie that in there, and this is going to be our body. Now, back in the day, I would literally pre-do these and then take the time to glue them, let them dry, because obviously one tooth catching on this material, see there, I just lost it. I'll just pull that guy out to get her out of the game. But one tooth hitting this is just going to blow it up. But the wonder of modern fly tying is we have UV resins, and so what we're going to do is we're going to treat this with the UV resin. You could put a wire through it. Sometimes I would put a wire through it for added durability, but like I said, if you lose one there, just pluck it out. And we're going to go almost all the way up here, right to where I've got a bag. I'm leaving enough room that I'm going to do some work up at the top, but this isn't going to be a multi-pieced front end, so we don't have to leave too much room. So we're going to tie that off, and we'll clip the excess. And it looks like I've got a little tag end there. I'm going to get that guy off. Oh, well, she's running on me. Get her out of there. Running away on me. Sometimes that happens. There we go. So now we're clean. And now we're going to take the UV resin. Oh, I've got a little tag coming off there. One of my favorite materials for actually doing this body, since things have developed a long way, is, a Lagartun's material. These guys are awesome. You can just rip that up. It's actually way easier. But in the sense of cost and what we had at the time, this was what we used. So now I'm going to take my good old Solarez, and I'm going to use the thin. You can see it here. It is awesome. And we're going to add a fairly liberal run of the thin. If we're using the thick, we use obviously way less. But a good heavy bead down the top of this. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to work it in. I don't know what it is, but I kind of like the glow that we get off anything that's Solarezed in. It sort of adds some translucency to it. It looks really cool when it's swimming through the water. Rotate this around, make sure I've got reasonable coverage, because like I said, we don't want a tooth to hit this stuff. So there we have her. She is ready for the nuclear light. Watch your eyes. And there we go. Give it a little twist. I am looking away on this. I'm not, again, I'm not an eye doctor, but I do not think staring at this light is a good idea as I nuke the camera. So there we go. We have our body done. A few stragglers there. I'll just clean that up. Get that out of the way. Okay, now we're going to run the top of the pattern. And this is sort of, I'll call it my trademark. I don't know if I originated it, but I put it into practice quite a bit. And this is what the pattern is called, choking black and blue. There were so many egg-sucking style patterns when I was guiding. We took the egg, which was usually a chenille ball at the head, and I put it into the pattern. And it was two-purposed, or there's sort of two reasons for this. See, I clipped about 1 millimeter of the core out there so I can tie it in cleanly. And we're going to tie it in there, and I'm going to work it back up onto the body that I've built. And then we'll go back up to the front, build a little thread base there so I don't have any mess ups. But anyway, so this used to be the egg, but I put it inside the pattern. Now this does two very important things, is this builds up the shoulders of the pattern. Now it's quite funny, so much has happened since I designed this pattern of building shoulders, composite loops, different stuff like that. And those are great. Those are really smart ways, but we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're trying to achieve a shoulder. Now this is a fairly skinny shoulder, but it's still going to get us a very clean teardrop to it. And so how we're going to do it is we're going to give, I usually do 3 wraps, sort of segmented over, and then I'm going to do a big one back on itself and make it fairly tight. Usually they roll a little bit there. We want to build this up fairly heavy. And so, and I'm pulling relatively tight. We don't want to lose this. If this does pop, this is one way that the pattern sort of falls apart. So I am going to be careful to make sure she's snug, and we'll tie her off. Now, I do recommend looking at this point. Sometimes you'll jump a thread loop over this and it just looks like garbage. The fish doesn't care at all, I can promise you that. But there is something in confidence when you have a pattern that looks nice. It's more for the fisherman, but that confidence is king. So now we are ready, and one of the little additives that I used to do when I was guiding was I'd put a little bit of angel hair, some bait fish style angel hair, added a little translucency to it. Again, it's quite interesting to see a lot of the sort of composite loops or dubbing brush style patterns that have sort of taken over. They sort of incorporate different materials like this, and I just sort of smush it around the egg, angle it where I want it. I want just a sort of a veil of this stuff around my egg, and then a loose wrap just and work it back, and there we go. Now we're going to clean that up. This stuff does make the head of your fly dangerous if you don't get it all. If you're missing and you've got a bunch of little fibers coming off, hit it with a lighter. These melt off really quick, but I think. So now we're going to build the umbrella to this pattern. And back in the day when I first tied it, intruders weren't a thing. This was pre-intruder world, and the intruders sort of took over steelhead flies by storm. And the reason's simple. They're an amazing pattern that take this sort of shouldered idea to the extreme. They add a lot of movement. But what we're going to use here is a whip or a dubbing loop. I'm going to show you guys how to do that today. And it's basically one of the steps in an intruder is to build this umbrella. But this style of pattern, some of the intruders, they want the umbrella to be open. With this style of intruder, I want the umbrella to be closed. Sorry, this style of pattern. This is not a true intruder. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Ostrich again, and I built a dubbing loop. If you saw how I did that, I made a loop of line, and then I looped back on top of it, and rewind and take a peek if you need to figure that one out. And we're going to take quite a bit of Ostrich here, and I don't want any broken ends on the Ostrich, so I'm looking up here. I'll just move that down. So I'm looking up here to make sure I don't get any broken ends. And we've got probably about an inch off of the stem, maybe even a touch more. I'll probably lose some of this by the time I'm done. And pinch this all together just so I've got something to work with. There we go. Now I'm going to, oh, I obviously missed a step. I love talking through a video. We always miss one. I forgot my dubbing spinner. There she is. If you guys can see that, there's the dubbing spinner. This is the one I use. I've got a few actually on the bench, but this one's the simplest and the easiest. I'm going to get my fingers in between here. You can see that. And I'm going to, again, goofy angles because I'm filming this direction, bear with. And we're going to put that in, and we're going to pinch it by pulling, if you can see that in the film, pulling on the dubbing spinner. Now that's all clumped in there. Now this is the hard part. This is where you don't want to mess around. First, I'm going to get rid of anything that's messed up that I don't like. And all these doubles are dangerous. You can see it's doubled over on itself. We're going to try to space that out. And the trick is to let it hang down. Gravity's going to do you a favor here. You can see I'm pointing, all the fibers are going down. If we try to have this with the fibers sideways, they just tend to clump together and tangle more as we space. So I'm going to start with one end, and I'm really going to systematically move through because we want to get all the sort of crosses out of this. If they're crossed over and messed up, when we spin this, it's going to turn into an utter train wreck and get you in trouble. So just take your time here, work through it, go slow. You see I got some doubles over and make that right. And I'm going to spread that out back there. Now this is probably going to be a perfect example of what I don't like in a dubbing loop. I'll see this over here. See how this is all lined up beautifully? That's what we want. See this? That's bad. That's when I spin that, that's going to clump all together and tangle up. I'm going to see if I can fix that here by very carefully working from one end and trying to space it out. And then I'm probably going to come in with my needle and see if I can line it up even better. But any of those double overs I want to fix. I bet you there's actually a way better way to do this, but this is the way I do it, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In the comments down below, if you guys have a trick or another video, you've seen some brilliant spin on deer hair, or sorry, on ostrich, let me know. Now, I'm gonna trim the top of this. I don't want these pointy ends sticking out in goofy directions, so I've come in there, rest the scissor on your finger, and clip it like this. This is the easiest way, sort of give yourself a base anytime you're doing something technical like this. And now what we're gonna do, I'll make sure that doesn't double over. I'm gonna spin, I've got some stuff hanging off here. Clean that up so you guys can see it. And now I'm gonna spin this guy. Now she's hanging down here, so I'm catching the spins in my finger. Oh, and I just let them through. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull my finger away, and when I do that, this will spin. And you see that went fairly well. You can see there's some double ups in there. I'm gonna add a little bit more to this, just a few more twists. That's gonna keep everything tight. And we'll do it nice and slow. There we go. Now I'm gonna come in with my needle. It's covered in Marabou or ostrich, and we're going to pick through here to sort of get these guys going in the direction we want them to. We don't want them wrapping around, and if we can, we're sort of going to adjust them just a little bit so they're all pointed out. Work your way through, take your time with it. If this is loose in here, if they're falling out, you haven't spun quite enough, so keep that into mind as you go. Working through, working through, working through. Okay, I'm happy with that. This is also the point you can get in with your scissors. If you got weird tag ends sticking out at different directions, do it. And we're going to wrap. I'm just going to get my thread out of the way here, and we're going to go around. And I'm going to keep it right tight to the ball because I do want to sort of overlay these a little bit. And when I start getting to the fibers, the ostrich fibers, I'm going to pull them back as I turn. And again, pull them back, trying to make sure nothing gets tangled as I do this nice and slow. Pull them back, sort of work them back a little bit. If I got weird ones, I pull on them. Work it back again. First couple times you do this, it's going to be a train wreck, I will just warn you, but you will get pretty quick at it. And then we're going to wrap there, and there we go. We're close. Now at this point, before I add more wraps and make things any tighter, if I've got any goof ups, I might just go in with my needle or my scissors, or even my whip finisher. I got that handy, and I can sort of pick out any tag ends. There we go. So that looks good. I want to look at it, make sure, yep, you guys are good. Oh, there's a little loop there. I'm going to work my way through that one. See if I can get that out. I might have to break it. No, there we go. Through it goes. And now I'm going to pull everything back, and I'm going to wrap one more time with the dubbing loop, and then we're going to tie off the dubbing loop just like you would tie off any material. We're going to tie that off here. Go around and back. Now we're going to cut the dubbing loop off. We're done there. And I'm going to add a few wraps over the first few strands of ostrich here just to make sure they teardrop nicely for me. Pick anything out, look at anything I don't like. Okay, that's good. I'm happy with that. Get back up here, sort of clean up any of the tag ends. Don't want to build too big of a head, but still want to keep everything tamed down. Okay, now what? We are going to do the first run of Marabou. Now I use blue Marabou. There's a bunch of guys that swear by the dark one. There's a bunch of guys that swear by Kingfisher. But I've messed with all of them, and I like sometimes having a variety in the box. Now the key is picking your feather. I don't know if you guys can see that clearly, but I've picked a feather that has very, very skinny stem and relatively long fibers. They don't have to be the crazy long fibers, though those are nice, but what I'm really looking at is the stem. I don't want that stem to be thick. If that stem gets thick, it's very hard to wrap. And if I do have a thick part of the stem up sort of here, I'm going to peel to that. So we're going to peel all that off. Some guys don't like wasting quite this much material, but I do recommend it because it'll mess up your pattern. It sort of lopsides your pattern. And now with this one, depending on the size, a small one I'll strip the entire side, but one that's sort of in this medium size that I'm tying, I'll strip a little bit of the bottom. So I've sort of got still some of the nice long fibers there, but I've stripped some of the smaller ones off the bottom. That's going to save on some bulk for me. And now I'm going to set myself up to tie this in. Always tying tips in with our Marabou. It's pretty straightforward, standard stuff. Good little trick before you tie it in. Give it a lick. It just makes life easier to deal with. And we will tie in. Now, I've said this in past videos. You guys have probably noticed that I spin backwards. If you are new to the channel, I apologize in advance. When I learned to tie, I was completely self-taught, and by the time I got the chance to tie with some really great tiers, it was too late to learn tying the other way, so I just stuck with it, even though it is. There are some moves that are a little bit more annoying because I'm going the different way, but there's some that are actually easier. Okay, so anyway, let's jump back into this. So we're going to palmer our Marabou just like we would do any style of Marabou, flipping it over, working it back, flipping it over, working it back. And we're still trying to leave a little bit of headroom. You can get tight on the head here if you aren't careful, so don't build a big base. Try to leave yourself some room. Now, once I get the Marabou tied in, I will pull on that Marabou strand because sometimes you got some looseness to it, and that will tighten things up. Double it back, 1 wrap, 2 wraps, 3 wraps, 4, and then I'm going to start using my trick where I back it off a little bit every couple times. You probably don't need those wraps to hold it in, and so that backing it off is going to help you. Now we're going to add some more flash at this point, and again we're looking for lateral lines, and so we're going back to the electric blue, one of my favorites. Get that out. Again, we're not going to use a ton. This is not a heavy flash pattern. Rivers like the Bulkley didn't need it, and I think in a lot of times when we've got reasonably clear water. So I'm going to use 2 to 3 strands. I'm going to lick everything here to make life easier. I'm going to double it over my line, up onto the side, and tie that off. It's on the back side. You guys couldn't see that, so I'm going to come around on this side, line it up, and there we go, the lateral line for you guys. Again, little lick here is useful instead of trying to mess with a bunch of material sticking in odd directions. 1, 2, 3, and I'll back one off just to be safe. So the next step, now that we've got the blue Marabou on, is we're going to put an accent piece of hackle. This is not a necessity, but it does make the pattern look really cool, and we're looking for 2 tips that are relatively skinny and fibers that are a little bit longer at the tip. They're not quite as pointy. A little bit thicker, add some volume to this. Let me see what I can find here. You don't want broken tips, unfortunately. Some guys get into really matching these up, and that can make a nice fly if they sort of curve in opposite directions. But I don't think the fish cares. I'm short. So I'll start off with this one. It's got a nice lean to the right direction. See if the other one is a lean on the other side for you guys. Yeah, that should work. And so I'm going to lay this out, and I want it not past the back of the fly. You can see that. And we're going to tie it in right at the Marabou head. Now, with these tips, you want to be careful. We do want to double them over. If you need to position it by pulling on the tag end, do that. That looks up. See, it wants to pop out on me. I didn't quite get it where I wanted to. There we go. There, that's better. A little bit out, but that'll swim nicely. Now you always want to double these over. So I'll do a couple wraps, and then we're going to double this piece over here. That's going to add a lot more durability when this gets plucked at. I remember hanging out with a really good tire, and he was looking at a young guy's patterns, and he said, "Oh, those are beautiful," and then he sort of plucked at all his hackles, and they all just fell out, and the poor kid was mortified. But it was a good lesson for us all to learn, because it is annoying when one falls out. It sort of kilters the fly a little bit funny. Okay, now we're gonna come on that backside unit. I think you guys are gonna see that, and we're gonna try to keep it the same length. Pinch it in. There we go. 1, 2, 3 wraps, and then we'll double that over. Now we're going to do one more veil of Marabou. And with this one, again, I've picked a stem that's very, very thin. I'm going to strip most of one side. I don't want this too thick here, but it's just going to sort of veil these hackles, veil everything out, give it sort of a heavy silhouette, because I want that outside of that pattern to be very defined so the fish can see it. I'm a firm believer in silhouette being almost more important than what we put in the pattern. And we'll tie that guy in. I am hugging the head a little bit too much. I'm probably going to have a bulky head on this one, but that is okay for this purpose. So here we go. We're going to wrap it right up against what we're dealing with here. And as always, I'm pulling that as I go back. Now, you can finish this fly with dumbbells. I will tie this in 3 different weights, and that's probably more important. You've probably heard me say this before, but more important than this pattern is having this pattern in different weights and sizes. So I'll tie it with medium dumbbells. I really don't go to the big dumbbells. You'll find very few guides go with the big crazy dumbbells unless they're a Chinook guide. But usually just the medium dumbbells get a good option for this. And then this is sort of the medium size. I might tie it a little bit bigger, and then the Mintruder size is kind of fun, trying it a little bit smaller than this. But definitely have all 3 in your box, and then vary weights on both of them. Have an unweighted and a weighted version of each. If you guys, we will be doing a video on what's in my Steelhead box. It may already be out. So check that out. You're going to get to see a number of different patterns that I use specifically for them, but more importantly, how I vary the patterns. Well, guys, that is, I guess I got to finish it. We'll throw a whip finish on this and be done with her. But that is the Choking Black and Blue, my sort of go-to trademark Steelhead fly. And as always, guys, if you want to see more videos like this, consider hitting the subscribe button. We also do the Friday Fishing Report, so check that out if you want to see more details on her. So we'll catch you in the next fly tying tutorial.